Welcome to Steady Badges Stories. Wherever you're listening from today, whether it's a kitchen table in Winnipeg, a truck cab on the Trans-Canada, or a break room in Halifax, drop your city in the comments right now. I read every single one. Hit that like button if this kind of story matters to you, and subscribe, because every story on this channel is built around one truth. Real strength doesn't make an announcement, it just shows up. Let's go. She was the contract nurse. That was the complete sentence Dr. Philip Crow used to describe her when the paramedic from Kearney asked who had taken the overnight chart. Not her name, not her credentials, not the fact that she had been managing morning vitals on all 14 beds since 05:30, and had flagged a potassium level in room 6 that would have been easy to miss and was not. The contract nurse. 4 words, delivered without looking up from the counter, and the paramedic had nodded, and that had been sufficient for everyone involved. Reyna Holbrook had arrived at Mackenzie Falls Medical Center on a Tuesday in late October, driving in from the south on a 2-lane highway that ran through 45 minutes of Shield Rock and Birch Forest before the town appeared. Population 1,800, give or take. The hospital sat at the north end of Monarch Street, a 2-story building of yellow brick that had been added onto in 1987 and again in 2003, each addition done with slightly different materials, so the whole structure read like a sentence written by 3 different people who hadn't bothered to read what came before. 14 beds, 1 attending physician, 2 full-time RNs, a phlebotomist named Gord, who also coached junior hockey on weeknights, and a rotating schedule of contract nurses filling the gaps. Reyna was the current gap, 8 weeks assigned. She had completed 3 of them. She was 38 years old. She wore her dark haircut close on the sides, longer on top, tucked behind her ears when she worked. Her scrubs were the standard royal blue of the hospital's contract pool, and she had requested the largest available size on her first day, citing comfort, and no one had asked a follow-up question. The extra fabric at the left forearm covered a lateral scar, 7 centimeters, the specific pale geometry of a fragment wound that had healed under field conditions rather than clinical ones. The loose collar covered the burn scar at her right shoulder. Everything else was covered by the shapelessness of the outfit itself, which was the point. She had been building this version of herself for 2 years and 4 months. Quiet, responsive, professionally competent in a way that read as unremarkable because she had calibrated the visible range of her competence with precision, showing enough to do the job and no more. It was the same discipline that had made her effective in a different context, reapplied to a different purpose. Dr. Crow had been attending at Mackenzie Falls for 23 years. He was 57, careful about his opinions, and had formed his understanding of the appropriate hierarchy of a medical facility sometime in the late 90s and had not revisited it since. He addressed his 2 full-time RNs by first name. He addressed Gord as Gord. He had not, in 3 weeks, addressed Reyna as anything other than a category. Contract nurse, the CBC doc needs to be filed before end of shift. Contract nurse, there's a family in the waiting room for Mr. Beauchamp in room 4. Contract nurse, Bay 1 needs a restock. She responded every time, filed the form, spoke to the family, restocked the bay, corrected nothing, because correcting Dr. Crow would require establishing a presence she had not come here to establish. On day 19, Pauline, the charge nurse, 51 years old, who had been running this floor since the 2nd edition was still new, stopped Reyna in the corridor outside the supply room. Room 9, she said, Mr. Farley. He knocked his water over again. On my way, Reyna said. Edmund Farley was 76 years old. His chart said left total hip arthroplasty post-operative day 4, ambulating with assistance, pain managed, stable. His daughter had driven up from Barrie to sit with him, and he had thanked her sincerely and suggested she go home. And the word sincerely was doing a great deal of lifting in that sentence. He had managed his own waddocking situation twice already, which Reyna had noted was not clumsiness, it was something else. He was sitting up against the raised headboard when she came in, pale blue eyes, steady and specific in the way of someone who catalogued everything that entered a room, not from anxiety but from long quiet habit. The water glass was on the floor beside the ivy stand, lying on its side, not broken. Just the one corner this time, he said. She picked up the glass, collected a cloth from the cabinet, crouched to wipe the floor. His eyes tracked her hands. You move quiet, he said. She looked up briefly. People say that. I've noticed it's usually one of 2 kinds of person. He tilted his head slightly. People who grew up in a house where quiet was a survival strategy, or people who were trained to move that way. She stood. She refilled his glass from the bedside pitcher. She wrapped the blood pressure cuff around his right arm. Which is it? He said. Just a preference, she said. He made a sound short that was not agreement. She took his blood pressure. 138/82, pulse steady at 68, she recorded both. He watched her hands the entire time, Not passively, not waiting for the room to return to quiet, but measuring something, checking something. Canadian forces, he said. She said nothing. Bosnia, he said. UNPROFOR 93-94. I know what a forces handshake feels like. I also know what a forces trained person looks like at a hospital sink at 05:45 on a weekday when they think no one is watching. She finished recording. She clipped the chart back to the board. Reyna Holbrook, she said. Edmund Farley. He extended his right hand. She took it. His grip was exactly what she had expected. Controlled, measured, built in a context where the quality of a handshake communicated something real. She had the same grip. She was careful not to use it, and he noticed that she was being careful, and she noticed that he noticed. Which branch? He said. She looked at the scar along the inside of her left wrist, just visible below the cuff she hadn't quite adjusted in time. Air Force, she said before she had finished deciding to. It came out quiet, restrained, like something said carefully. He nodded once, did not press. How long? He said. 10 years active, separated 2.5 years ago. He was quiet for a moment. My CO in Bosnia used to say that the most dangerous place you could put a capable person was somewhere they were specifically trying not to be noticed. He paused. He wasn't talking about the person. He was talking about what it costs them. She was almost at the door. He was right, she said quietly, and left. In the corridor, she put her back to the wall and breathed until her pulse was where she needed it. If someone has ever looked straight through the front of you to the actual thing underneath, you already know exactly what that moment feels like. Drop a comment and tell me where you're listening from. I want to know how far this one reaches. She came in early the next 3 mornings. She sat in the parking lot for 7 minutes each time watching the tree line before going inside. She read overnight charts without being asked. Edmund's blood pressure had spiked to 151/90 at 02 on the second night, returned to baseline by 04:30, below the threshold for calling Dr. Crow. She wrote it in her own notepad anyway. She did not go back to room 9 for 2 days. On the 3rd day she had a legitimate reason, afternoon vitals, and she went. He had a crossword on his tray table. He put it face down when she came through the door. 3-year gap, she said, wrapping the cuff around his arm. She had not decided to say it. Between when I separated and now, I've been doing this. She gestured at the room, the scrubs, the chart, building something ordinary. How's that going? He said. Adequately, she said. Adequately, he repeated, the same word, a different tone entirely. She read his pressure, 142/86, slightly elevated from the morning. His pulse had a small irregularity she hadn't noted before, a skipped beat pattern, every 7th or 8th count, faint and inconsistent. The kind of thing that could be nothing, or could be something worth watching. She wrote it in her notepad. Whatever you left, he said, it's still there. That's not a criticism. I left things too. They don't get smaller. You just get better at carrying them. She looked at him. Air Force, she said, pararescue. Not the way she'd said Air Force 3 days ago, as an accidental slip but as a choice, small and deliberate, like setting something down. Edmund nodded once, slowly. He didn't ask the follow-up question. He understood that she had given him exactly as much as she was prepared to give, and that the correct response was to receive it carefully. Thank you, he said. The specific way you say thank you when someone has handed you something they weren't required to give. In the corridor, she stood outside his door for a moment with her eyes closed. From the parking lot below came the faint sound of tires on wet gravel, ordinary, finite, manageable. She was at the nurse's station completing discharge paperwork for room 3 at 14:22 when she heard it. Not the sound itself, not at first, a frequency. A low diesel engine vibration that arrived through the soles of her shoes before it registered as sound. A rhythmic compression in the floor that had a specific density she had not felt in 2 years and 4 months, and recognized immediately anyway. Her pen stopped on the form. She looked up at the window at the end of the corridor. Pauline appeared from around the station corner. Do you hear? How many beds are prepped? Reyna said. What? Reyna was already at the window. Through the glass, the rear parking area, the tree line, the access road, and 3 dark military transports coming around the bend in close formation, no lights, no sirens, moving with the specific coordinated compression of vehicles that had a destination and no patience for the speed limit. Call Dr. Crow right now, Reyna said. Tell him blast injury inbound, multiple casualties possible, arrival under 90 seconds. How do you? Call him now, Pauline, not loud, not aggressive, specific. Pauline moved. Reyna walked to the supply room. She pulled on gloves. She stood in front of the trauma cart for 4 seconds, cataloging the layout, the placement of every instrument, every supply. She had verified this cart on her first week. She had verified it every morning since. Then she stepped back from the cart. She put her hands in her scrub pockets. Contract nurse present to observe and assist. She positioned herself at the door frame. The front doors came open 58 seconds later. 4 operators came through them, the way people come through doors, who have done this in conditions considerably worse than a 14-bed rural hospital in northern Ontario, and were treating this as the easiest version of something they had performed many times. They wore plate carriers and tactical vests coated in the fine gray dust of a Canadian Forces training range. Their boots left marks on the clean linoleum. They were carrying a litter, 2 men to a side. The man on the litter was alive, but not by a margin that required anything less than immediate intervention. The lead operator was not the largest of the 4, but was the one the room organized itself around without instruction. He came through the door with a single sweep. Floor plan, personnel, exits, equipment, all of it taken in before the doors finished opening. He was perhaps 42. Square jaw, 3 days of range dust in his beard. The specific settled economy of movement that distinguished people who had learned to conserve effort for when it was actually needed. "Clear me a bay," he said, informational. The tone of someone who had said it before in contexts where compliance was immediate and universal. Right side chest, left leg. Get your physician now. Pauline had the phone in her hand. Dr. Crow was already coming down the corridor, alerted by the earlier call, and he stopped when he saw the 4 men and the litter and the particular atmosphere that entered a room with people who had come from somewhere bad. He stopped and looked and said nothing for 2 full seconds. "Bay 2 is prepped," Reyna said from the doorframe. "Flat, no inflection, no claim attached to it, information only." Dr. Crow looked at her. Pauline looked at her. The lead operator turned and looked at her. She was looking at the patient. She had been looking at the patient since the doors opened. The tourniquet on the left thigh, a cat, applied as high as anatomically possible, windlass twisted past the standard stop point, meaning the field medic had corrected forcefully after inadequate initial occlusion. That tourniquet had been on long enough. Distal limb color confirmed it. The leg was a problem, but it was not the clock she was running. The chest was the clock. Tracheal deviation to the left, visible from where she was standing. Paradoxical chest wall movement on the right side, the specific asymmetry of absent lung expansion. Distended jugular veins, clear even from the doorframe. Tension pneumothorax. The needle and the chest tube were the distance between this man and wherever the margin ended. She kept her hands in her pockets. Dr. Crow directed the team toward Bay 2. Pauline moved the crash cart. The lead operator coordinated his team in quiet bursts of specific language as they moved through the corridor, and then his automatic sweep of the hallway returned to the supply room door frame and slowed. He registered. Blue scrubs, 2 sizes too large. Dark hair, close cropped on the sides. A person standing at the boundary between a wall and a room in the middle of a casualty situation who was not panicking and was not doing nothing but was specifically, deliberately, choosing not to do something. The distance between those 2 things, visible to exactly the people trained to see it. He took 2 more steps. His team was through the bay door. He stopped in the corridor with 5 feet of linoleum between himself and the woman in the supply room doorway, who was watching his casualty through the bay window with an expression he had seen before on faces that had seen the same things he had. He opened his mouth. He did not say her name. He said the other one. Wraith. Not across a distance, not a question. A direct address at a normal speaking volume, using a name that had not been directed at this woman in 2 years and 4 months. And it arrived in the hallway of Mackenzie Falls Medical Center, with the specific weight of something that had been waiting to land. The corridor went completely still. Pauline's hand stopped on the crash cart handle. Dr. Crow turned from the bay door. The 2 floor nurses at the far end of the hall looked up simultaneously. Through the bay window, the 3 other operators registered their team leader's position and followed the line of his attention to the door frame where the contract nurse stood. Nobody moved. Nobody spoke. Reyna Holbrook stood against the frame with her hands in her scrub pockets and her face completely still. Edmund Farley had told her that whatever she was carrying showed in the way she stood, even if he couldn't name what it was. She thought about that for exactly 1 second. Then she looked at the man on the litter through the bay window. Tracheal deviation increasing. Monitor just connected by Pauline displaying a heart rate of 134 and a blood pressure of 78/44. Oxygen saturation 79 and dropping. A trend line going somewhere fast. She looked at her hands. Then she took them out of her pockets. If you have ever heard someone call a name you thought was gone for good, you already know exactly what happens in the 3 seconds that follow. Stay here. This story isn't done yet. The moment Reyna took her hands out of her pockets, the hallway changed. Not loudly, just a shift. The kind that happens when a person who has been choosing not to occupy a space steps into it fully and every conscious person in the room registers it before they can name what registered. The lead operator, Warrant Officer Denton Keyes, she knew the name attached to that face, had known it the moment he came through the door, saw the shift and exhaled through his nose, once quietly, as though something he'd been holding had been allowed to release. "Excuse me," Reyna said. Not to Keyes. To Dr. Crow, who was standing in the Bay 2 doorway with one hand on the frame, and an expression that was somewhere between authority and the first edge of something he had no category for. She moved past him. He stepped aside without quite deciding to. Inside Bay 2, the 3 other operators had Master Corporal Luis Torres positioned on the bay bed, litter removed, equipment arranged in the improvised order of men who knew how to work in bad conditions and had made the best of good ones. Torres was 26, so his color had moved from poor to critical in the 90 seconds since they'd come through the doors. Tracheal deviation still left, increasing. Blood pressure on the portable monitor, 75/41, heart rate 139, oxygen saturation 76 and still falling. Reyna pulled gloves from the crash cart without looking at the box. The box was where she knew it would be. "What is she?" Dr. Crow began. "Tension pneumothorax," Reyna said. Her voice was flat and factual, needle decompression then a chest tube. "I need a 32 French tray and a pleur evac assembled, Pauline." Pauline did not move immediately. The gap between the contract nurse who had been restocking supply carts for 3 weeks and the person currently giving instructions in Bay 2 was producing a visible error in her processing. Pauline. Same volume, different register. Low and absolute. The specific frequency of someone who has delivered this instruction before in conditions that did not tolerate delay. The tray, now. Pauline moved. "I am the attending physician," Dr. Crow said. "You do not have the authority." "Step back." Keyes' voice from the bay doorway, quiet, final, the patience of someone who would wait precisely as long as necessary for the correct decision to be made, and had waited in considerably worse rooms than this one. Dr. Crow turned. Keyes met his gaze with the level attention of someone who had already decided how this was going to resolve, and was simply waiting for the building to catch up. Dr. Crow stepped back. Reyna was already at Torres. She located the second intercostal space on the left side at the mid-clavicular line, 2 fingers palpating the intercostal margin, confirming the landmark with the certainty of someone who had performed this procedure in moving vehicles, in darkness, in conditions where there was no margin for error, and she had never once had the luxury of getting it wrong. "Shoulders," she said. One of the operators moved. He had the shoulders. His partner had the hips. They had done this before, the positioning, and it showed in how immediately and correctly they moved. She drove the needle in. The hiss of decompressing air was immediate, pressure-driven, escaping the catheter with enough force to confirm what she had assessed before the first move. She removed the needle, left the catheter, taped it at the hub. The trachea shifted. On the monitor, saturation 81, 85. "Tube tray," she said. Pauline was already there. Sterile packaging open, the 32 French ready. Reyna's hands moved. 5th intercostal space, right side, anterior to the mid-axillary line, the incision. Fast, clean, the blade finding the space with the confidence of a hand that had made this cut in field conditions that made a well-lit rural hospital feel like a surgical theater. Dark blood welled, scalpel down. Kelly clamp into the incision, spreading. The deliberate, controlled violence of the procedure that looks like damage and is repair. Dr. Crow, visible at the edge of her peripheral vision, had gone very still. She swept one gloved finger through the incision, confirmation pass, clear. Torres made a sound from deep in his chest. The sound of a body remembering it was still in the fight. "He's with us," one of the operators said quietly. She placed the chest tube, fed it past the first resistance and into position, connected the pleur evac. The machine engaged, pulling air and blood from the space that had been collapsing since the training range. The monitor climbed 88, 90, 93, 95. "Sats," she said. The floor nurse at the monitor, a young woman named Caitlin, who had not breathed at regular intervals for the past 4 minutes, looked at the screen. 95, holding. Heart rate. 118, 114. Blood pressure. 83/55, rising. Not good, moving in the right direction. "He needs surgery for the femoral," Reyna said. She was stripping her gloves. She looked at Keyes. "How long has that tourniquet been on?" 41 minutes from application. "He needs a level 1 OR and a vascular surgeon. What's your medevac ETA?" "Orangey is 11 minutes out." "Fine. Continuous vitals until the bird lands. That tourniquet checked every 8 minutes. If SATs drop below 89 after the tube, find me." She looked at the operator nearest Torres. "You stay with him until touchdown." "Yes, ma'am," he said, without hesitation, without irony. Reyna walked out of Bay 2. The corridor was completely still. Pauline at the station, Dr. Crow against the wall. Caitlin and the other floor nurse in the doorway to room 6, both looking at the woman in the blood-stained blue scrubs, who had just performed 2 advanced trauma procedures in under 6 minutes in a 14-bed rural hospital, and had walked out of the bay, the way you walk out of a room where the work has been done. She went to the sluice room at the end of the hall. She turned the faucet on and scrubbed her hands until the water ran clear. The door opened 40 seconds later. Keys came in the way a large man enters a small room when he's conscious of its dimensions. Sideways, staying close to the door, not advancing into the space, he smelled like range dust and the particular sweat of someone who had been under operational stress since before sunrise. He looked at Reyna at the sink. He looked at the water running over her hands. "Dispatch flagged a name when we were routing to this facility," he said. "Holbrook R, contract nursing, Mackenzie Falls. I almost missed it." A pause. "You didn't change your name." "No reason to," she said. "I just left." "Wraith." He said the call sign the same way he'd said it in the hallway. Not a question. A confirmation of something that had been needing to be confirmed. She said nothing. "Last posting, 3CS Ore Exchange, Kandahar. Separated 2023. He paused. "You were the best field medic I ever saw work on an operator down, and I've worked with a lot of them." The water ran. She kept scrubbing. "We were running live fire integration at Petawawa," Keys said. "Adjacent range breach shouldn't have been possible. Torres took frag to the chest and leg, down in under a minute. I had 2 options, base hospital 32 minutes, this facility 14. Then dispatch flagged your service record." He let that settle. It was the right call. "You didn't know I'd step forward," she said. "No," he said. "I didn't, but I know what a person looks like when they're making themselves stand in the back of a room. And I know what they look like when they stop." The water ran. She turned it off. She stood with her hands on the rim of the sink. "I left for a reason," she said. "I know the reason." "Then you know I can't go back." "I'm not here to recruit you," Keys said. "I'm not asking you to recertify or re-enlist or go back to anything." He was quiet. "Sergeant Yusuf Elmi." The name arrived in the room the way certain names arrive, without warning, bypassing everything, going directly to the place where the defenses were originally built. She said nothing. Her hands tightened on the sink rim. "He made it through everything," Keys said. His voice was careful in the specific way of someone delivering something that required care. "After the Kandahar incident, after the recovery, he separated 8 months after you did, went civilian, took a position as a paramedic in Edmonton." He paused. 6 months ago, a structure fire on the north side. A wall came down during evacuation. He was extracted but didn't survive transport. 6 months ago. She had been in Mackenzie Falls for 3 of those months. She had been invisible and deliberate, and exactly as protected from the world as she had designed herself to be. And Yusuf Elmi, who had survived 2 deployments and a rocket strike and the kind of recovery that costs a person years, had died in an Edmonton building she would never see, and she had not known, because she had made herself the kind of person who could not be found. The design had been the point. The design had cost her this. "He used to say I was the worst person he'd ever seen at pretending to be ordinary," she said. Her voice was not steady. She didn't try to make it steady. "He was right," Keys said, simply. "He would have found this." He gestured at the scrubs, the sluice room, the mop leaning against the utility cabinet. "He would have found this very funny, and then he would have found it sad." She stood at the sink for a long moment. The antiseptic smell of the room, the drip of the faucet. Through the exterior window, the distant thump of the orange helicopter beginning its approach to the rooftop pad. She felt it through the floor before she heard it clearly. The same low vibration she had felt through her shoes an hour ago when the military transports came around the bend. Her body registered it with the same precise internal recognition, before her mind caught up, before she decided whether to acknowledge it. She breathed in, she breathed out. "Thank you," she said, "for telling me you didn't have to." "No," he said, "I didn't." He reached into his vest and set a card on the edge of the sink. "Plain white, 1 number in black ink. That's not a job offer, it's a contact. People who speak the same language if you ever need to talk." He paused at the door. "Torres would have been gone before the orange bird landed. You know that." He left. Reyna stood in the sluice room with the card on the rim of the sink for 3 minutes. Then she walked back into the hallway. Dr. Crow was at the nurse's station. He looked up when she came through the sluice room door. He looked at the blood on her scrubs. He looked at her face. He held the look for a moment. The specific expression of a man who has operated inside a fixed understanding of something for a long time, and has just been handed information that requires him to rebuild it entirely. "The needle decompression," he said, "second intercostal space." "Yes, doctor." Correct placement, not a question, he had watched it. And the tube. Yes. He was quiet, he looked at his chart, he looked back up. Your name, he said. Reyna Holbrook. He nodded once, looked down, wrote something, looked up again. There are clean scrubs in the supply room, he said. Your size. A pause, you should change before the evening rounds. It was not an apology. It was not close to an apology. But it was the specific acknowledgement of a man who does not have the language for what he means and is saying the nearest available thing to it, and she understood it, and she accepted it. Thank you, Dr. Crow, she said. She went to room 9 at 16:30 with the afternoon vitals chart. Edmund was in bed with the overhead light off, only the small lamp on the side table casting the room in low amber. A different quality of light than usual. He said when she came in, I heard the helicopter. He's stable, she said. They took him 30 minutes ago. He watched her face. You all right? She pulled his chart from the board. Pauline's earlier notation was there, a second instance of the irregular pulse pattern, flagged for morning review. She read it twice, set the chart back. Someone I served with died 6 months ago, she said. I found out today. Edmund said nothing. He didn't reach for a response. He understood what silence was for. I made myself unreachable, she said. I thought I was protecting things. I was hiding. She stopped. I wasn't there, not for any of it. No, Edmund said, not cruelly, just accurately. She sat down in the chair beside his bed. She had never sat in that chair before. Had always stood, chart in hand, the professional distance of a contract nurse and patient maintained. She sat without the chart. Edmund closed his eyes. His breathing was even but slower than it had been, deliberate in a way that was new today. My daughter wanted to stay, he said. I sent her home because she was frightened. She loves me completely. But she was frightened of this. He moved one hand slightly. Toward the room, the monitor, the particular situation. I couldn't have that in the room with me. A pause. You're not frightened of it. I'm frightened right now, she said. Not of this, he said. You know how to be present when there's nothing to fix. That's rarer than people think. His hand was near hers on the blanket, not urgent, just there. Stay a minute, he said. She took his hand in both of hers and she stayed. His breathing slowed. The monitor traced its uneven green line, irregular but not yet in the configuration that meant immediate collapse. He had time, not a great quantity of it, but enough for what he was using it for. You'll be all right, he said, quieter now. You don't know that, she said. I know the difference between a broken person and a person carrying something heavy, he said. I've been looking at both for 76 years. A breath. You're the second kind. She sat beside his bed until he fell asleep. Then she went back to the station and wrote up the day's incident forms and did not think about the card on the sluice room sink. She thought about it anyway. The internal phone rang at 02:53. Reyna had been at the nurse's station for 3 hours, having come in early and taken the overnight from the night nurse without being asked. She had been completing logs and not sleeping, which was not a new condition. Only an honest one now. The night nurse, Marlene, picked up the phone, listened, said quietly, I'll get her. Room 9. Reyna walked the corridor without hurrying. It was the particular unhurried pace of someone who has learned, through repetition in difficult places, that the speed of your approach changes nothing about what you find when you arrive. Edmund's room was quiet, monitor glow only. His breathing was audible from the doorway, shallow, labored, with the specific quality of a respiratory system working against increased load. His color was wrong in the monitor light, a grayness at the lips that had not been there in the afternoon. She checked his pulse. The irregular pattern she had noted twice before was now sustained and pronounced. Fast, slow, fast under her fingers. The monitor confirmed it. New onset atrial fibrillation, acute and destabilizing in a 76-year-old man post-operatively with an uncharted cardiac history. She reached for the phone. His hand closed on her wrist. Reyna, he said. She stopped. His grip was the same as always, measured, weaker than yesterday in a way he had not tried to conceal. I know what this is, he said. His voice was quiet, completely calm. I've been around long enough. Edmund. She kept her hand near the phone. I'm calling for a transfer. They can manage the arrhythmia at a cardiac unit in Huntsville. It's manageable. Maybe, he looked at her. Sit down first. She looked at him. She sat down. He was quiet for a moment, working through a breath that took longer than it should have. Outside the half-open window, the northern Ontario darkness was complete. No moon, just the faint suggestion of spruce against a slightly lighter sky. My CO in Bosnia, he said, used to tell us that the bravest thing wasn't holding a position or taking a hill. He paused for a slow breath. He said it was to stay with someone when there was nothing left to do, even when staying didn't change the outcome. Another breath. He said staying was its own kind of valor. He was right, she said. Yes, his voice was quieter now, the pale blue eyes steady in the monitor glow, still sharp, still seeing. You're going to be fine, Reyna Holbrook. You don't know that. I know what a broken person looks like, he said. I've been looking at them for 76 years. You're not broken. A breath. You're just carrying something heavy. There's a difference. The monitor tone shifted at 0319. Not a flat alarm, a sustained single note, low and steady, replacing the irregular rhythm that had been there before. Reyna looked at the screen, at Edmund's face, at the stillness that had settled across both. Her hand stayed in his. She sat in the chair beside Edmund Farley in the low glow of the monitor and held his hand and did not look away from any of it. 7 minutes, then she stood. She smoothed the blanket at his side. She stood at the foot of his bed for a moment and looked at the man who had seen her clearly in a building full of people who had not bothered to look. She went to the nurse's station. Time written in the log, 0319. She called Pauline's overnight line and reported the death in clear clinical language. She said she would remain on site until the morning shift. Then she stood in the corridor outside room 9's door and looked at the darkness inside. Yusuf Elmi had died in an Edmonton building she had never seen, and she had not known. She had been invisible and unreachable by design, and her design had cost her the chance to grieve him with the people who knew what he had been. Edmund Farley had died in a room. She had mopped herself on her 3rd day here, and she had been present, and she had held his hand, and he had known someone was there. She could not have had the first. She had been given the second. The mathematics of that sat in her chest like something lodged, and she did not try to move it. She walked to the sluice room. Denton Keyes's card was on the rim of the sink where he had set it 11 hours ago. Reyna picked it up, plain white, 1 number in black ink, the weight of it nothing, the weight of what it represented, something she did not yet have a complete word for. She put it in her scrub pocket. She went back to the station, sat in the corner chair, and finished the overnight forms in the fluorescent hum. The morning shift arrived at 0630. Reyna gave the incoming nurse a full handoff, thorough and specific, every patient by room number and current status. Then she collected her bag and her clipboard and walked the corridor toward the exit. She stopped at the door of room 9. The curtain was drawn. She stood there for a moment. Then she walked on. In the parking lot, the air was cold and clear and smelled of spruce and coming winter, the particular sharp smell of northern Ontario in late October when the ground is almost ready to freeze. Her car sat at the far end of the lot, under the broken light standard, furthest from the entrance. She had parked there on her first day without thinking about it. The habit of a person who had spent years choosing the position least likely to draw attention. She stood beside the car and looked up at the hospital, 14 beds, 1 attending physician, the dark window of room 9, curtain drawn. She pulled Denton's card from her scrub pocket, looked at it in the early light. She could go back to the contract, complete the weeks, submit the paperwork, become a civilian nurse in a civilian building, and stay invisible until the performance became so practiced, it was indistinguishable from the real thing. She was skilled enough at it by now that it might even hold. Or she could figure out what came next for a person who was both things simultaneously. The one trained to pull people out of fire, and the one who had spent 2.5 years trying to set that down and had discovered, finally and completely, that it did not set down. There was no version of this day that had been easy. Edmund Farley was gone. Yusuf Elmi had been gone for 6 months and she had not known. Those 2 facts sat in her chest at the same weight and would sit there for a long time, and she was not going to pretend otherwise. But Torres was alive somewhere in a surgical suite in Ottawa, and Edmund had not been alone, and she had not looked away. The lesson she had been running from for 2 years and 4 months was this: you cannot save everyone. There is no version of enough that ensures it. People die in buildings you never see, in moments you are not present for. Some of that is distance, some of it is time. Some of it is the simple, irreducible fact of being one person in a world that does not pause to accommodate that limit. But you can show up for the people in front of you. You can take your hands out of your pockets. You can sit in a chair beside someone at 3 in the morning and hold their hand and refuse to look away from the hard thing. You can let someone call your real name in a hallway and not run from it. All of that had happened today. The sun came up over the spruce line to the east, slow and specific, the way northern light comes, not sudden but accumulating, spreading across the parking lot gravel and the yellow brick of the hospital wall, and the dark curtain of room 9 and all of it simultaneously, indifferent and complete, and making no distinctions about who deserved it. Reyna looked at the card one more time. She got in the car. She pulled out of the lot and onto the highway heading south, toward the light coming up over the shield, the rock faces gray and ancient on either side of the road, The sky above them a pale, cold gold that did not promise anything but did not take anything away either. The card stayed in her pocket, not set down, not put away, held the way you hold something you haven't yet decided what to do with, which is different entirely from something you intend to leave behind. Reyna Holbrook drove into the morning. If this story stayed with you, if Reyna's courage and her grief meant something, I want to hear from you. Leave a comment right now and tell me where you're listening from. Subscribe to Steady Badge's stories, because every story on this channel is built for people who understand that the ones carrying the most are often the ones saying the least. Hit that like button. Every single one matters. I'll see you in the next story.